How's it going, super friends? Welcome back to my channel and to my review of the new DC Multiverse Superman figure from McFarlane Toys. Let's just get right into this one. So first off, the box art for these figures is really simple, but really effective. All of the figures in the series actually have that black and white and blue color motif. Nice and simple and clean looking with that great big window box in the front. The left-hand side of the box tells you where they got the inspiration for the design and the sculpt of the figure. In this case, it's Action Comics 1000. And the other side is more black, white, and blue, with some of that window box wrapping around the corner. While the back of the package, still equally as simple and attractive, also has the image of Superman they were trying to base the likeness of this figure after, while also looking at other figures you can get in the series. And just for those of you who live in Canada, I got this guy at EBGames for $29.99, and here's the barcode. Fantastic. Now let's get him out of the package. Pop the top and pull him out. Before we actually take the trading card and the figure stand off the back, let's just take a moment to appreciate the fact that Todd tried to design something interesting for the inside of the box too. Alas, those of you who want to keep their figure boxes mint, this is going to be something that's going to get in the way of that. Because to get this stuff out, you have to rip the packaging. Okay, and now that we've got the last Son of Krypton out of the packaging, we can take a closer look at not only the figure, but also the trading card, the 2 extra hands, and the figure stand. Here's a look at the flight stand that comes with Superman. The arm snaps into the base like that, and then you have a figure stand. And if I'm being honest, no sir, I don't like it. For one, the arm is a solid piece and it's completely stationary. And although you do have a very sturdy join here with some downward motion and also some upward motion, as well as 2 nice strong claws with a bunch of teeth holding them in place, this really isn't that useful. Basically, this figure stand really doesn't offer a whole lot in the way of range of posability. Like, sure, it can hold him like this to get him into a flight pose, but typically you're going to want a little bit bigger range of posability motion with a flight stand. The trading card, obviously it's Action Comics 1000 on the front, and the back, it's just like a regular old school trading card, having the name of the character, and then some statistics, and then a little bio. And of course, we have the 2 extra hands. One's a fist, and one's kind of a grabby hand. And then of course we have the figure, which in my opinion, those online images that were first shown actually did no justice to how cool this thing actually looks in hand, in real life, in person. For one, the color palette of red, yellow, and blue that they've chose is altogether complementary of each other and really makes this figure stand out. And then as for that head sculpt, I think it looks fantastic. It's got the spit curl, it's got the bum chin, it's got the square jaw. I'm pretty happy with the face paint deco. It looks like they used that dot matrix to do the eyebrows and the eyes. And there's some nice differentiation in skin tone between the eyes and the mouth and the rest of the face. Now, as for the body itself, for one, we can take note that that S is a sculpted on separate piece right there on his chest, and it's painted a shinier, more flashy red, and I think that that really does the symbol justice and really makes it pop. Also, kudos to McFarlane for getting the details in the cuffs of his suit correct, with those 2 V-shaped chevrons that go all the way around his wrist. Also, I like the fact that the trunks and belt are one separate piece that the legs fit up into and the body fits down into. And then the boots are cool because they have that comic accurate sharp ascent to the V with a sharp descent going around the back of the boots. These are completely comic accurate, so Todd was definitely paying attention. There's also some details on this suit that you might miss if you're not paying attention, like a seam down the lines of his pants, and also some finer detail work here under his arms. Certainly a very well-designed looking figure. Now, if there was one thing about the appearance of this figure that I could tell you I really don't like that much, it's the non-cloth goods cape. And I'm okay with a cape not being non-cloth goods, but this rubber is actually harder than you would think, and it's pre-posed. So for me, those are definitely 2 drawbacks, as well as the neckline of said cape is actually really, really thick. Like, I'm not sure how much you're really seeing this, but right here, it's just really, really thick. Honestly, for me though, that's not a huge deal. That will be just a simple custom cloth goods cape swap, and the figure will be, in my opinion, almost perfect, at least looking. I like the look of this figure. But now it's time to test out that brand new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse articulation and see exactly what its limitations are and what it can and can't do. First point of articulation would be the neck, and it's on a ball peg, but you can see inside of the neck there, they've actually made that hole a lot wider to try and make sure there's a lot of movement in there, and there really is. But also be warned, for those of you who like to be able to jam a figure's head right back to get him in a flight pose, that is going to be about the limit of what you can achieve. You'll see that his hair actually gets in the way, so he can look down like a lot, but back not so much. But never fear, because he does have a ball joint in the torso, and you know me, I like a ball joint in the torso if I can get one that is very usable. And you know what? First of all, for downward scrunchiness, it's not that bad, especially when you combine it with the ball joint in the waist. That's actually not that bad. And the same thing with up. So when you combine that with the head, clearly you will be able to get him into some reasonable-ish flight poses. Add to that the fact that he's got a butterfly hinge, a rounded ball hinge in the armpit that you can hear clicks into place, and that's actually a pretty good range of motion for the arms up. He's got the bicep swivels right here, and you can actually get these guys to go all the way around in a circle. He unfortunately does not have the double jointed elbows that a lot of people had hoped that he would have, and again, you can see the clicky points where these elbows they click into place, and that is as much as you're going to get for that elbow articulation. Not even 90 degrees. I know that a lot of you aren't going to like that. Actually, I would rather they crunch up just a little bit more too. You can see the wrists are those rounded hinges, so the hand itself is on a peg, and then of course we know that the hinge is going to be able to go up and down, and you can actually turn the hinge if you want to as well. For the inside of Superman's legs right here, I believe this is more like the McFarlane Toys setup in the groin. You've got your clicky hinges that can also rotate, and I think that's a pretty good way of hiding the articulation point and making sure it's not ugly looking. And they can go all the way out. That's about what you're going to get for forward and backward, because Superman's butt gets in the way, and also Superman's trunks are going to get in the way too. For me, not a big deal, because I like the overall look of the trunks being a separate piece enough that I can deal with that. And then these double jointed knees are so crunchy. Those are going to be so useful. And yes, I will address the fact right now that they do look kind of ugly when they're fully extended like this. Certainly they're not as advanced as far as appearance goes with the Mafex figures. And then of course, as we can see, it's evident he's got those rounded hinges in the ankles, and yes, they could have gone with something slightly more attractive, but these are going to be very useful, very posable, and he's got those toe articulation joints right there as well. Little tiny hinges. So just what can you get out of these articulation points? Well, let's find out. He can do the starfish. He can get into a reasonable flight pose. Certainly not ideal, but also I've definitely seen worse. And clearly, as you can see, you'll be able to get this guy into some pretty dynamic poses. So, overall, I really feel like Todd actually paid attention to the articulation points that people seem to want. It's not completely ideal, but it's also still very good. And now onto that topic of scale, with McFarlane having departed from the classic and familiar 6-inch scale and moving onward to embrace a much larger 7-inch scale. I know that some folks are upset about this change, feeling that somehow McFarlane was responsible to make sure that his figures matched with a pre-existing company's figures, while still yet other people embraced the change, being excited for the chance to collect an entire new series of figures. So first off, on the left we have a DC Universe Classic scale figure, and on the right we have that classic 21 points of articulation DC Direct Superman. And then on the one side we have a DC Icon scale, and then on the other we have the DC Essentials. And then we have that much used classic Superman sculpt based on Alex Ross's artwork, along with the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive NECA Superman on the other. So certainly this Superman is a larger figure, but that's not to say that you can't fudge it and pose him with some other figures that are roughly 7-inch scale. For example, here he is in between a Wonder Woman and a Flash that are both DC Essentials, and I think that he fits in great. He's bulkier than Flash, which he should be. And here he is posed alongside his cousin, and I feel like this is scale appropriate right here, with Superman being much larger than Kara Zor-El. And here he is scaled up next to the DC Universe Classics Darkseid, and I really feel like these guys scale well with each other. And then finally we have him depicted alongside the Mammoth Signature Collection Doomsday, and I feel like this also is pretty scale accurate and appropriate depending on which artist is depicting Doomsday. So as far as posing options with other characters, I feel like there are options with this Superman figure that you can fudge in, at least until there are more DC characters that McFarlane has put out for us to pose together with the Man of Steel. Now, just before I give my final thoughts on this figure, I have been asked to do some head swaps to show you what he looks like with different heads, so let's do that first. Here's what he looks like with the classic icons popped onto the shoulders. Here's what he looks like with the Superman from the JLA 4-pack. Here's what Supes looks like with the head from the NECA version. Here's the head sculpt from the History of the DC Universe. Here he is with that Secret Files Clark Kent head sculpt. And then finally here he is with the head sculpt from that DC Direct Classic 21 points of articulation version. Okay, so now that we've had a pretty thorough look at this figure and everything it comes with, can I suggest to you as an action figure reviewer, in good conscience, that you take your time and money and go on the hunt for this fella to try and find him at Walmart, Target, or if you live in Canada, at EBGames? What is my final verdict? Well, that's not exactly a simple answer. By watching this video, you could probably tell that I like this figure. I'm satisfied with it. I'm more than satisfied with it. And as much as I've enjoyed collecting 6-inch scale DC figures for almost 20 years, I must say, the departure from 6-inch scale to 7-inch scale doesn't really bother me that much, and I don't really feel that McFarlane was ever on the hook to make sure that his figures were compatible and comparable and posable with my existing multiverse figures and DC Universe classics. So for me, scale is simply not an issue. I'm okay with 7-inch scale, and I have plenty of 7-inch scale figures that I can pose this guy along with. Not to mention, McFarlane is absolutely going to release a dump truck full of DC figures over the next 3 years. As far as articulation goes, it's not ideal. Yes, there is a lot of articulation and a lot of movable parts with this figure. Some of them are less usable than others, but again, for me, that's not going to be so much of a big deal. However, I do know that others of you out there would probably prefer an ab crunch. Some of you may not be satisfied with the amount of flight posability that this figure does have, and that's understandable. I know that some of you live for the flight poses. And even though the Superman figure does boast highly articulated toes, ankles, knees, wrists, the lack of double-jointed elbows will be something that is a bit of a letdown for some collectors. As far as the overall look and design of this Superman figure goes, is he perfect? No. But no action figures are, and I say that every single time. And I definitely wish that this figure had an absolutely different cape. It's big, it's clunky, and it gets in the way. But I feel that the $19.99 price tag that this figure commands, along with all of the other figures that don't come with Collect and Connect Batmobile pieces, which come in at a higher price point, I feel like he's definitely worth the money, bang for buck, in comparison to other action figures that come in at the $19.99 price range. My one major complaint isn't even actually the figure. It's the flight stand. Only one side of the claw actually opens up, and it only actually points down. You can't get it to point up. Combine that with the fact that the base is actually quite small for supporting a figure of this weight and size, and the fact that the arm itself is just stationary, the stand is pretty much useless. But as far as I'm concerned, if you are on the fence about this figure, I say go for it. It's definitely one of the best looking Superman figures I've ever seen. And I'm telling you, he is going to look fantastic posed up on your figure shelf. Anyway, Super Friends, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Hopefully you found this video useful, educational, enlightening, entertaining, just a reasonable waste of time in general, and if you did, please leave a like on it. Any comments you have, pop them down in the comments section below. And finally, if this is your first time visiting my channel, then I invite you today, on behalf of the rest of the Super Friends, to join the DC Squad, simply by hitting the subscribe button. Have a DC day, everybody, and take care.